Let's be lovers, we'll marry our fortunes together. I've got some real estate here in my bag, counting the cars on the New Jersey Turnpike. They've all come to look for America.
Well, that is the Bernie Sanders brand new campaign ad. And if you thought, as I did, that this was a quirky campaign here, very little different than, the O'Malley campaign, you would be wrong. He is running neck and neck with Hillary in both Iowa and New Hampshire. And as Bernie pulls closer to Hillary, she's getting closer to President Obama. Many of you may have seen or not seen a piece, an op-ed in the Huffington Post called "What President Obama's Legacy Means to Me" that Hillary penned. And I'll read a small portion here, quote, "As president, I'll carry forward the Democratic record of achievement. I'll defend President Obama's accomplishments and build upon them." Dominic, I seem to remember not too long ago she was doing everything she could to separate herself from the Obama presidency, and now she can't run fast enough to throw her arms around him.
That HuffPost op-ed, it should be titled really "To the Democratic Base," because she's saying right now, Sanders is giving me a little bit of a run for money, but all of this is smoke and mirrors.
No, wait a minute. You've been through around this,
right,
and you got a good
this
BS
is not going to last.
Isn't this really? You don't write what you did. You don't run to Obama this fast in the process unless you believe, I'm losing Iowa, I'm losing New Hampshire,
no, that's not what she's
and I better
doing.
stop the bleeding in
That's
South
not-
Carolina and
No,
Nevada.
that's not what she's doing at all. If you really want to know the truth, that was a message to black people. That's what that is. That's saying Democratic base, listen, Iowa, New Hampshire does not represent demographic-wise all of America. As soon as you introduce more traditional Democratic voters, it's not even a race. That's what that was all about.
I hear him. He makes sense. But part of me says there still is, maybe not within the campaign anymore, but outside, this idea that this is just delaying the inevitable of a coronation of Hillary. And while if I'm a betting man, I'm going to Vegas, I'm betting that she's winning the nomination. I think they've exposed some vulnerabilities in the Hillary camp. And again, I always go off of, and I said this about the Jeb Bush campaign in the beginning, show me people who are in love with Hillary the candidate. I know people who love Bernie Sanders. I know people who love Donald Trump for good or for bad. I don't know anyone who loves Jeb Bush. And I don't know anyone right now, to a lesser degree, that's in love with the Hillary campaign that they've seen to this point. I think, disagree if you will, there's legitimate reasons for her to be concerned.
First place, I don't buy the coronation analogy. I think she's actually done quite well in a very contested environment. It may have been more contested than she anticipated. She's shown how tough and resilient she is. And in the end, I agree with Dominic, when you get out beyond Iowa and New Hampshire, which are different demographically than so much of the rest of the country, first place, I think she'll win. She'll certainly win Iowa, and I think she'll do extremely well in New Hampshire. But I think when you get out,
she was losing by 30 points in the last
poll. That's one poll. That's one poll. There's another poll goes the other way. She will do well, and I believe in the end he will come along and be a strong supporter. Don't forget, she's been a Democrat all her life, to your point.
Okay, but here's what I can tell you. You ask Joe Schmo, Shelley, and they'll say, well, what's Bernie Sanders about? He's trying to level the playing field. Now, some people may not like it. Some people say socialist guy with a shock of white hair with a Brooklyn accent. Are you kidding me? But what is Hillary for? You fill in the blank. I don't think anybody can answer that question.
First place, you ask Joe Schmo, who's a Democratic loyalist, who has voted Democratic, who cares about the future of America from a Democratic perspective. They know what Hillary Clinton's about. She has a lifelong commitment to issues involving women and children and families that is as authentic as anything Bernie Sanders puts on the table. As real. You meet her one-to-one, you will know. She will pick up the phone when your kid is sick. Let me just say that and say, how is your kid today, even though she met me yesterday.
I happen to believe that. She's been good to this program. She's been good to this station.
I'm not talking about her policies.
No. I'm talking about as a human being that is never conveyed. We always joke around, but in the end, SNL's parodies are usually spot on. Yeah. What's the parody of her on SNL?
That she'll do anything to get elected.
And she's a robot.
Yeah, that she'll say anything that she needs to do to get elected. And that's one of the concerns that I think some Democrats have. That's why Bernie Sanders is polling better than I think people expected that he was going to. But I would respectfully say I think you're coming from a flawed premise when it comes to Hillary. She doesn't need the bandwagon. She doesn't need the big crowds and the momentum that Bernie has or that Donald Trump has. She is the best argument for Hillary to win the Democratic nomination is I can beat the Republican. And as long as that's going, that's
Even
all
though
she
you've
needs.
seen the opposition polls, Bernie Sanders is better than her in head-to-head in some of these matchups.
No, I understand that, and I think I think if you asked most Democrats whose positions align better with what they feel and the positions they hold, Bernie would do better than Hillary would. In part because there are questions about what Hillary's priorities really are, but she's so much more electable than he is. And when it all comes down to it, whatever fissures there are in the Republican Party, yeah, you might have some people who don't vote for the Republican nominee because of that
You know what?
break. That will not happen on the
If I
Democratic
close
side.
my eyes to his point, I could say the same thing about the Republicans. That at the end of the day, the flirtations with that lunatic from Texas or that loudmouth from New York, they'll come to their senses and they'll get behind the party standard bearer, whether it's Rubio, whether it's Bush, whether it's whatever. I'm not hearing that on the Republican side. Yeah. So why should I expect it's the same thing on the Democratic side?
Yeah.
I totally disagree. To sort of analogize that way is she
That's
is
good TV.
she is a former Secretary of State. I'm not to cut you off, but she's a former Secretary of State who tried to rebuild diplomacy imperfectly in a world that was very divided. She put us on a path towards the greater diplomatic successes of the Obama administration. She has a lot of actual heft on the policy side.
You're preaching the converted, but
No,
I
I'm
think
not
you're
preaching.
underestimated here. You're underestimating just how. I don't know what the electorate is anymore, but I've given up trying to figure it out.
Well, I'll tell you what from the observer side, it's passion. The difference in these primaries is the passion. The passion that he shows when he speaks is different than the controlled, albeit perhaps the more politic way of doing campaigns. The difference in the Republican side is passion. When Trump speaks, even if he's an opportunist, he speaks with passion about things. And people are drawn to that because they're tired of the Bush, and I say Bush because he's not passionate. He's kind of a cold stone who talks, and he may be the best qualified person. Hillary, she's just got so much baggage, but she doesn't get passionate enough. She doesn't argue the case. And he stands up there and riles the crowd up. He gets them going. I'm telling you, this whole thing is a question. People are looking for somebody who's passionate about it. One other point. She has made a mistake in the national election because Obama is not popular. And this is going to come back. If she is the elected, she's the nominee. I'm telling you, this whole thing with the Huffington Post.
But what choice does she have? If she doesn't rally black folks, it's over.
That's her base, and you're absolutely right. And they've made several comments about how critical they are to her winning this nomination. My only question is, depending on who the Republican nominee is, it's going to hurt her in the general.
Scott, on the passion gap that you were just referencing, are you suggesting that you think Bernie's going to win the primary and be the nominee for the Democratic Party?
Iowa's weird. Okay, I don't know how it's a very strange
and New Hampshire
thing. Yeah, but New Hampshire, they're weird sometimes. But I think
Do you think Bernie's going to be the Democratic nominee? Because if the answer is no, then the passion gap.
All right, let me
may
ask
not
you
be
a question. Let's
stark.
say Bernie Sanders does win Iowa and New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Okay? Does your tune change? Do you still consider it just a blip? Because you can look at one person in the history that's lost both states and won the nomination, maybe your husband, but still only it's happened one time. Do you still dismiss it as just delaying the inevitable?
I think it's harder to dismiss it as being just. I think you have to take the challenge a little more seriously at that point, and also because we will start focusing on that question
exactly.
to no end, and so that changes the dynamic of the race a little bit. But looking at the states that
we're
follow,
betting, Dom.
look
We're
at the states
betting
that
at
follow
that
New
point. You better
Hampshire,
give me eyes.
South Carolina, Nevada, the whole South during the Super Tuesday. That's going to be her strong area.
Richard, after Iowa and New Hampshire, Bernie will get some momentum. You got a better chance of being elected president than Bernie Sanders does.
I don't think he does.
No one is going to vote
Andrew
for
always
someone
bring me down.
that identifies himself as a socialist. The Republicans would eat him alive.
But the other issue is not just passion. The issue of income inequality resonates with so many people. And he has
tapped into
it. She is very capable of understanding it. She doesn't do as good a job as she needs to about articulating it. But to his credit, he has recognized that as the economy improves, people still feel this tremendous insecurity.
They're wrapping me, but Shelley, here's the thing. Maybe you can figure this out because You've seen her when she was a senator in New York.
Yes.
Okay? There's a reason why I can name 15 Republican congresspeople, mayors, county execs who lined up behind her. John McCain basically endorsed her on national TV at one point, okay? What part of her did you see then that she still has yet to show this country? Because I can't put my finger on it, but I know that person I haven't seen yet in Iowa, New Hampshire, or anywhere else.
I think you're extremely harsh. You're talking about governing versus
I'm talking about
running.
campaigning.
No, you're comparing how she was in governing, where she's incredibly effective, to campaigning and saying, bring all that with you. She is doing a fine job. I agree with Dominic. At the end of the day, not a coronation, she will be the next president.
You're not going on limbs right now. I'm just telling you, it'll be real interesting if you're saying the same thing after Andrew freezes his you-know-what off in New Hampshire and reads the returns
the
back
joke's
that
on
night.
me.
Exactly. All right, coming up next, we're joined by a financial expert, and he's going to talk about those wild gyrations we've seen on Wall Street since the beginning of the year and whether that's going to make the economy a central issue in the race for the White House. And then, yes, we will talk about the snow that's hammering D.C., heading up the coast to us. Meteorologist Jamie Booth will join us as well to tell us the latest.